Let's talk about hydropower or hydroelectric power. So, what is hydropower? Hydropower is just electricity that is created by the natural flow of moving water. There are multiple types of hydropower. All right. So there is pumped hydro, which we were talking about, which provides like peak load supply. It uses water that is cycled between the lower and upper reservoir. So, there's either a lake or maybe a man-made reservoir lower in elevation, and then another one higher in elevation. Normally, one of these is man-made. A lot of times, this doesn't just exist. And when the electric demand is high, water will be taken from the upper reservoir, released back down into the lower reservoir, and it is going through turbines, spinning those turbines, and producing electricity. When the demand is lower, they use some energy that is being produced, and they push the water back up into the upper reservoir so that it can be released to generate electricity later on. There is also storage hydropower. This is a large system using a dam to store water in a reservoir. Electricity is produced by releasing water from the reservoir through a turbine, activating a generator, and it provides base load as well as the ability to be shut down and started up at a short notice. This can offer energy storage capacity to operate independently of the hydrological inflow for many weeks or even months. So this is kind of like what the pumped storage is what they were talking about with the San Diego project. Storage hydro is a much larger system. So this would be a massive reservoir on top. That would be kind of like those ones they were talking about, where there would be almost 1,000 megawatts available with how much water could be released. So run-of-river is a facility channeling water flow from a river through a canal most of the time, which spins a turbine. This usually has no storage facility because it is such a small system, and it tends to just use the flow of the water. They provide a continuous supply of electricity, which is called a base load. There is less flexibility for this operation compared to something like pumped storage or storage hydropower, but there is some flexibility for daily fluctuations. You can regulate this flow at the facilities, so you can increase it to produce more electricity, or you can withhold it to produce less. But where it is just a setup on a river, it's a lot less flexible than something like pumped hydro. And then there is tidal and wave energy, which is, a less established group of technologies, both of them, but they are growing. So, how popular is it? So currently, more than 25 countries depend on hydropower for more than 90% of their electric supply. This is crazy. This is absolutely insane. We were talking about earlier how Greece doesn't have any sort of electricity, any source, right? Not natural gas, not coal, not renewables. They don't have anything that is above 50%. But currently, there are more than 25 countries depending on hydropower for over 90% of their electricity supply, including Norway, which relies on hydropower for about 99.3% of their electricity. The Netherlands coming out with a whopping 99.98% of their electricity coming from hydropower. And then in another 65 countries, electricity generated by water has a huge share of their electric mix, right? So when we talked about Greece, it's like 8%. In Brazil, it's almost 84% of their electricity comes from hydro. New Zealand coming close with about 73% of their electricity coming from hydro. Why is it so popular? Well, it is extremely flexible. Like we talked with pumped hydro, and even in that San Diego project, it can basically be turned on and off for the most part to provide energy when necessary. So obviously the run of river is more constant energy, but something like storage hydro or pumped hydro will utilize the excess energy to push the water back up into the upper reservoir. And then when energy is needed, they're able to just press a valve and let the water start to flow, spinning those turbines and producing electricity for the grid. So one of the biggest problems with renewables right now is you can't store your energy. And like they said in that San Diego project, there are days where there's too much solar for the grid to actually use it, and it is just wasted. It doesn't go anywhere. So something like pumped hydro would allow you to use that energy to move the water back up into an upper reservoir, and therefore that solar energy, that wind energy is still going to good use. Overall, it is extremely renewable, it is very environmentally friendly, and it is very affordable. So the average cost of electricity production for various generation techs shows that hydropower is by far the cheapest, costing only about 2 cents per kilowatt hour. But obviously, it is not perfect. There are downsides. One of which is it is extremely expensive to produce or to create. Just looking at something like the Hoover Dam or the Three Gorges Dam, they are extremely large. So the Hoover Dam was $51 million in 1931, which would be worth almost $1 billion today. Hydropower has been contested in the past, and many of them are seen as major losses for conservation efforts. A lot of developments actually have been stopped by environmental groups, but they are mainly seen as losses for conservation, which is interesting because there are the two sides of the environmentalists, right? Which is prioritizing conservation and prioritizing clean energy. And this is an area where they kind of butt heads, which is really interesting. These reservoirs can still release a large amount of methane and carbon dioxide. Obviously, if they're built out of concrete, then that is already a lot of carbon dioxide that is created from that production. But even independently of that, the area around them, around these dams, can be filled with water. Trees and plants will start rotting and decomposing, and they will not be taking up oxygen, right? Or they won't be using oxygen or providing it. So these power plants would literally cause decomposition, dumping massive amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the environment. So yes, clean energy is good, and this is a clean form of energy, but it can lead to emissions, almost like third-party emissions, right? It can impact something else that will then emit. So what does the future of hydropower look like? Well, for the most part, it will mostly include maximizing the efficiency of these dams, increasing the environmental performance, and most likely not building new dams, right? New dams don't really make sense for a couple of reasons. So most of the good locations have already been developed. Most of the sites that remain would only provide marginal power benefits, and there would be great environmental costs. So for the most part, building new dams really is not worth it. In addition, healthy rivers are a natural defense against climate change and global warming impacts. So we do need these healthy rivers. We need clean water, and we need the flood prevention. Fish and wildlife need these healthy, free-flowing rivers more than ever as the world is warming and these rivers are warming. And building dams can destroy the natural defense systems that healthy rivers give to our communities. A lot of these dams use antiquated and inefficient equipment. Rather than building new dams, we should just be requiring dam owners to bring their plants up to modern standards to ensure that they're generating the max amount of power from every drop of water that they're using. There are also many dams that don't have hydropower capacity. So in the US alone, there are more than 90,000 dams, only a fraction of which have hydropower capacity. For the most part, if these dams already exist, adding this capacity can be done without degrading the local environment, especially if the dams, like I said, are in good repair and don't need to be expanded or anything else. Also, we have to talk about tidal and wave energy. These are two things we haven't touched on a lot. It's been a lot of the run-of-river and the storage hydro. Tidal and wave energy really is the future. And the US is aware of that. They came out and said that they're going to be providing millions in funding for tidal energy and river current systems. So I believe the number is $35 million to advance tidal and river current energy systems. They're very aware that tidal energy is a huge thing moving forward. It is a massive opportunity for energy. And it is basically just produced by the surge of ocean waters during rise and fall of tides. And it is extremely renewable, as tides will always exist as long as the moon does not explode. There aren't many commercial-sized tidal power plants in the world, The first one was located in France, and the largest is in South Korea. Right now, the US has no tidal plants, and there's only a few sites where this energy can be produced at a reasonable price. There are currently 3 different ways to get tidal energy. There are tidal streams, barrages, and lagoons. For most tidal energy generators, they work by turbines being placed in tidal streams. Tidal stream is a fast-flowing body of water created by tides. Turbine would take that flow and turn it into energy. Placing the turbines here is very complex because the machines are large and can disrupt the tide they are trying to harness. The environmental impact could be severe depending on the size of the turbine and the site of the tidal stream. They're most effective in shallow water, which can produce more energy and allow ships to navigate around these turbines. The next type we talked about is a barrage. It uses a large dam. Water can spill over the top or through turbines because the dam is very low. These can be constructed across tidal rivers, bays, and estuaries. It harnesses the power of tides the same way a river dam harnesses the power of a river. The barrage gates open as the tide rises. At high tide, the gates close, creating a pool or a lagoon. The water is then released through the barrage's turbines, creating energy at a rate which can be controlled. However, the impact of these can be very significant. The land is completely disrupted. Change in water level can impact plant and animal life. And there actually is the impact of the salinity inside these lagoons lowering. And then the final type is the tidal lagoons. And these are constructed kind of like we were talking about before. It's a body of water, mostly ocean water, partly enclosed by a barrier. They can also be used in estuaries with fresh water emptying into them, which is kind of interesting. This would function very similarly to a barrage, but it can be structured along the natural coastline. And the best part about this is that the impact is minimal. These lagoons can be constructed with natural materials like rock. They can appear as low breakwater or a seawall at low tide and be submerged completely at high tide. Animals could swim around them, and smaller organisms could swim inside of them. Large predators like sharks would not be able to penetrate them, so smaller fish would actually probably thrive, and birds would likely flock to the area to get their food. The downside here is that the energy output from these generators is likely low, and there are currently no functioning examples yet. It has a lot of potential. Obviously, there is something to be said about the environmental impact. There is something to be said about how much energy will actually produce, but still a lot of potential there, which is really great. The future of hydropower is strong. There's a lot to look forward to here. I figured we could learn a little bit. So let's talk about tidal power a little more. I know I just dove pretty deep into it, but let's learn a bit more about